Hi, my name is Lori Jiava. I am the former Town of Wappinger Supervisor. The video that you're about to watch was a part of the forum that was held at Pace University on January 16, 2018. My participation was based upon my perspective of the critical need for essential services in our state. The editorial you see here was written in June of 2017. As a supervisor of a large town in Dutchess County, I understood the significance of having basic life and advanced life support services. On February 27, 2016, our town was faced with our ambulance provider going bankrupt and closing up their operations, leaving 29,000 residents and travelers without adequate life-saving services. We were fortunate enough to have our county's emergency management team help us in finding a temporary alternative solution. Without many options, our town had to go from 2 dedicated ambulances to a system status plan, thus leaving us to deal with mutual aid consequences. Having a large town, we needed to ensure that an ambulance was within 3 to 5 minutes away. This was a challenge. During discussions with other elected officials, I quickly realized this was a topic that causes strife and creates difficult conversations. For me, it was pretty simple. As chief elected officials, our primary responsibility is the health and safety of residents and travelers. Without having a mandated essential service law, municipalities are left to try to figure out how to provide a service for emergencies that could potentially become disastrous. My article is a real conversation starter. My video presentation is something that all stakeholders need to think about. I truly believe in public service, and I believe we need to address community issues. The issue is a large one, and this can no longer be ignored. I may have just finished my term as town supervisor, but my mission of public service and my quest for a remedy to this critical problem will not stop. I hold a Master's of Education and a Bachelor's of Science in Public Affairs. I'm available to assist any organization with educational forums, and I'm available to speak upon request. Please let me leave you with this. Our efforts need to continue, and our voices need to be heard. We need to work collaboratively so that we can address the needs of our communities. Our municipal boundary lines should not determine if we have ample emergency services in a time of need. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation to attend this evening's forum. As many of you are aware, I was invited to attend the forum because of a recent article I had written in the Poughkeepsie Journal regarding our emergency services throughout the state. As town supervisor of the town of Wappinger, I saw a critical issue that surrounded emergency services on many different levels and from many different perspectives. Throughout my public service career, I have found the lack of legislation has caused a significant amount of wasted money. In many cases, we have become a society of being reactive instead of being proactive. Whether the issues of emergency services or it's a natural disaster response, our different levels of government ultimately leave us at a disadvantage. Local levels, which oversee infrastructure and community issues, have been faced with short office terms that are continuously being turned over, which prevent us from long-term planning and being visionary leaders. This, coupled with a tax cap, can ultimately create bigger issues. State and federal governments are to oversee the needs of constituents as a whole, but issues vary from community to community. Government becomes so multifaceted that it actually can become irrelevant when we look at underlying issues, and virtually all attempts to address issues have become reactive. Be that as it may, our problems do not disappear, and they still need to be focused on. Considering tonight's attendance is primarily made up of first responders, there's no need for me to preach about the potentially devastating effects that have been caused by not mandating essential services. While there are several phases of emergency services, one that I find most critical is the fact that there is a bill mandating essential services sitting on the floor in Albany right now. For those of you who may not be aware, not having mandated essential services can mean life or death, but it can also mean a significant loss of money to communities and more often insurance companies. Out of the 4 bills that are currently sitting on the floor in Albany, I feel that we need to discuss at least the 2 most important ones: community paramedicine and essential services. Let's discuss community paramedicine first. The bill essentially saves lives and an exorbitant amount of money. Community paramedicine allows for EMS service providers to administer and treat patients rather than taking them to an emergency. The 2 most at-risk groups would be elderly people and children. Once they're taken to the emergency room, whether it's for something as a bee sting, an asthma attack, or diabetic shock, they are then at risk to being exposed to perhaps MRSA, staph infection, RSV, to name a few. An elderly person may be just going for a diabetic checkup, and because of our EMS laws, they either have to sign off or they have to be taken to the emergency room, rather than the EMS provider just treating them at the house and avoiding the costs of insurances to go to the hospital. More often than not, our ambulance providers have now taken on and had to deal with the opiate epidemic. All too often, our ambulances are running from town line to town line, administering Narcan daily. I know in Dutchess County it has taken over the EMS services, and we are at a loss because we cannot keep up with the needs. This, unfortunately, has to be addressed as well when it comes to the community paramedicine bill that is sitting on the floor. Now back to essential services. While I'm not an expert in the field, I can say that from a government's position, that making decisions during tragic accidents or during national disasters and even terror attacks can be a nightmare if you don't have a regional-based system. The scenario I gave in my editorial was a real one. A man experienced chest pains. He's alone, on the phone, speaking to the dispatcher at 911. He loses consciousness. In some towns, they have dedicated services. But in some towns, they are on system status. They're either a volunteer-based service or they run off mutual aid. And in some cases, it can take up to 20 minutes for an ambulance to get to somebody's home or to a scene of an accident. This can mean life or death. But when it comes to the conversation around the table and you're speaking with elected officials, it becomes all about the almighty tax dollar. For me, I cannot put a price tag on someone's life. And the approach is to be more proactive rather than reactive. This is a daunting issue. The approach right now is to educate the community, informing them about possibilities, informing them about the systems that are within their communities, and telling them what can happen in every corner of a town or a municipality if a catastrophe strikes. Quite honestly, I cannot believe that politics should dictate someone's life during an accident or during a catastrophic event. When I say politics, I do not mean necessarily party, so I don't want you to misconstrue that. But I do believe that the political figures dictate the movement of these bills, and it is up to us to lobby for all of these efforts that have been put forth by people in the paramedic industry. Unfortunately, I do not have the million-dollar answer to this problem, but I can attest to something for government leaders. Most of them don't want to discuss this issue. Most of them don't want to because it eventually trickles down to the constituents and their tax dollars. My response is, if you're a chief elected official in a town or in a municipality, you're to uphold your oath of office, and you are to do what you should do, which is to keep the health and safety of all your constituents on the forefront. You should make decisions based upon that. In 1994, Dutchess County implemented the Bureau of Fire and then changed it over to Dutchess County Emergency Management. From there, in 1999, we went to a 911 system. These things have ultimately helped, but these are not helping the gaping hole that surrounds the essential services and mandating a system-wide regional approach. I say it all too often. You have children that are young drivers or elderly people, and when they drive from town to town, they don't necessarily know that there's not an ambulance provider or that they're based on volunteer services and that somebody may not be around for 20 minutes. This can mean life or death for some people. The bottom line is that government leaders need to depend on their first responders to know what the needs of the communities are. We need to have roundtable discussions to have state senators, assembly members, county executives, local leaders, and first responders at that table. The answer to our needs and the deficits rest in your hands of the first responders. Your voices are critical in addressing this issue. Municipal boundaries should not change a person's chances of life or death, but sadly they do. My advice to you all is to keep lobbying, keep talking to your legislators, keep educating your residents, and write letters to the editors in different communities, because it's our job to educate everyone and make sure that they're informed, because this is about life or death. I am open to having another forum and to include residents and legislators. I feel that that's the only way that this is going to make a difference in the future. For anyone that wishes to speak with me or has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me either through my email at ljiava@yahoo.com or on my cell phone at 845-234-3456. Again, it was my pleasure. Thank you for this invitation, but I want to thank you, the first responders, because of all you do to save our lives. Thank you.